Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Filipino Genealogy channel. For today, we are going to briefly look at how some parishes throughout the Philippines during the Spanish period interpreted differently the number of days counting from the birth of a child to the baptism. Recently, a fellow genealogist asked this question about the date of birth versus the baptismal number of days indicated in the record pertaining to Andres Bonifacio. Here is his question. We know that Andres Bonifacio's birthday is celebrated on November 30th, but based on references to his baptismal record, he was supposedly 3 days old when he was baptized on December 2, which means that his birth date should have been on the 29th instead of the 30th of November. So while church authorities provided parish priests and their scribes with templates and guidelines in recording births and other events, many friars and their assistants still interpreted these rules in their own way. Thus, the differences. Let's take a look at some examples to understand this further. In this first example of the baptismal record of my great-grandfather Isidro Lucero, who was born in Argao, Cebu, in most records, the date of baptism is found on the first few words in the first line of the record. As such, my great-grandfather was baptized on the 16th of May. As seen in my great-grandfather's baptismal record, on the fourth line, it stated clearly that he was born on the 15th of May. Nació el día 15 de mayo, which means born on the 15th of May. This is, of course, what we all want to see in baptismal records. The date of baptism is given clearly, and the date of birth is also given clearly. Unfortunately, this is not always the case. The next record is the baptismal record of Mariano Tabuebue Marcos, father of former President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos and grandfather of current Philippine President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. We know from most sources that Mariano Marcos's birth date was on April 21st, 1897. When we look at his baptismal record, we see that he was just a day old when he was baptized on the 22nd of April, which coincides with what we know that he was born on the 21st of April. This third and last record is the baptismal record of former President Diosdado Macapagal, who was born in Lubao, Pampanga. We know that he was born on September 28, 1910. We know that Diosdado Macapagal was baptized on October the 12th and that he was 15 days old upon his baptism. And here we see the difference from the previous record of Mariano Marcos. If we simply deduct 15 days from October 12, we get September 27 and not September 28 as his birth date is supposed to be. So what does this tell us? This tells us that the priests and the scribes all over the Philippines during the Spanish period did not always have the same way of interpreting the number of days that a child is on the date of baptism. Some, like the first record we saw of my great-grandfather, it was simple enough. The date of baptism was given, and so was the date of birth. In the second record that we saw, the birth of Mariano Marcos was simple enough to deduct from his date of baptism. He was 1 day old when he was baptized, which gave us his birth date of April 21st. Easy enough. However, looking at the third type of record that we saw, there were also places in the Philippines such as Tondo, Manila, with the baptismal record of Andres Bonifacio that we read earlier, as well as that of Lubao, Pampanga, at least after the Spaniards left the Philippines, when the date of birth was also the day 1 when counting the number of days that a child was upon baptism. So, unlike the other records, when the counting starts a day after the birth, in some areas like Lubao, Tondo, the counting of days starts on the actual date of birth. What this means is that we have to be careful in looking at the records in order for us to know if this particular place in the Philippines counted the number of days at the beginning, which is the date of birth, or did they count the usual way of adding 1 day after the birth as day 1.